Really, every organization has an opportunity to improve how it delivers value. And so you can either initiate that change yourself as an organization, right? Become agents of your own destiny, or have change thrust upon you by external forces.
Technology is transforming how we think, how we lead, and how we win. From Intervision, this is Status Go, the show helping IT leaders move beyond the status quo, master their craft, and propel their IT vision. Welcome back to Status Go. We've talked a lot about digital transformation on this show. Businesses everywhere are waking up to the fact that they must transform to remain viable in today's world and in tomorrow's. Today, we are going to explore transformation in an industry that you might not expect: parking. Not an industry that comes to mind when you think of tech. To me, that's exactly the point. Every company, every industry is changing the way they do business. Our guest today is Matt Belanger. Matt is the Senior Vice President of Service Delivery for Denison Parking. Welcome to the show, Matt.
Thank you so much, Jeff.
Matt, our audience is always interested in our guest background, but before we get to that, parking? Technology? Really?
Yeah, I agree, Jeff. From the outside looking in, you would think parking is very simple, right? Put the car between the lines, collect a little money, and move on, right? But in practice, parking is incredibly complicated. It's a fragmented industry with multiple privately held operators, many of whom are going through generational change. There are lots of operating models between the operator and the asset owner, the folks who might own a parking garage or parking lot. The customer facing systems, most of those cashiers and attendants have been automated away over the years, but not completely. The back office has not seen much innovation, and you have new technology coming in. There are mobile apps, things like license plate recognition, autonomous vehicles, electrification. All of those combine to create an environment that's ripe for opportunity and frankly for investment. Even looking to some of the largest private equity firms like SoftBank, right? Always a disruptor when they come in. They invested $1 billion into a mobile app startup at the end of 2018, and that mobile app startup turned around and acquired two of the largest operators in the industry to become the largest operator in the U.S. And that was just transformational.
It's just not something that you think about, right? We all use parking garages and parking lots all the time. And a lot of times the technology, you don't even really see it. Yeah, maybe when you're checking out and that type of thing, but it is fascinating, and I can't wait to dig into that. But I'd really like to back up a little bit and start with your background. If you don't mind sharing a bit about your journey with our audience, how you ended up in this role, and a little bit about your career.
Sure, absolutely. I started my career as an engineer in product development, and I passionately enjoy that process of discovery and design and build and launch and the life cycle management of an offering. That's always been a passion of mine. That allowed me to get into the mergers and acquisition space, which certainly has a product component to it, but is
Yeah.
also largely cultural business process transformation, right? Bringing the teams together to really innovate and capitalize on the new opportunity. And from there, I was able to springboard into organizational building and leadership and sort of that enterprise transformation role.
You've spoken before at some of our gatherings here in the technology community on design thinking, and I think that's been a big part of your career. I know you've written about that as well, right?
Yes, yes, absolutely. That process of understanding your users and the pain points that the users are experiencing and ideating on a future state and sort of prioritizing how you get from where you are today to where you want to go, and then launching and delivering that, and getting that user feedback and continual refinement is just it's an amazing experience to go through that through any industry or company, and I really enjoy that aspect of the role.
And I imagine that you're bringing that skill set, that background to Denison Parking as you're helping guide this transformation. So, why don't we start at the beginning? Talk about Denison Parking and how this transformation kind of has gotten off the ground, so to speak.
Sure. Yeah. Thank you. So Denison is a mid-size operator across 11 states. We've been in business since 1934, and many of the systems that we use to operate the back office today have been around for quite a while. We had a leadership change about 3 years ago, and that allowed us to critically examine the current state of the business and the trajectory that we wanted to go down. And change can be hard for everyone, right?
Yes.
And we all have a tendency to become habituated, right, to the practices and processes that we're doing. And really every organization has an opportunity to improve how it delivers value. And so you can either initiate that change yourself as an organization, right? Become agents of your own destiny, or have change thrust upon you by external forces, right? And so
Right.
as an organization, we decided, that our values, right? Our tagline is experienced, innovative, personal. And that investment just felt in line with our shared values to refocus on our clients and deliver that next round of experience.
So, one of the things that I get really focused on is the concept of vision. And I know we didn't talk about this in our pre talk, Matt, but where did the vision come from for what does I know there never really is an
Mhm.
end state, but what's the vision and where did it come from to start down this path?
Yeah, that's a great topic, Jeff. The company for a while, was very much on an even keel. Revenue was good, great profit potential, and on ongoing basis, right? Things are great. Why would anyone take it upon themselves, right, to inject change into that equation, right? And
Right,
and
right.
and yet at the same time, change is imperative because when you look across the industry, right, there are, like we talked about, some major players, other investment flowing in, digital disruption, and if you sort of project forward a year, 2 years, 5 years, things would be fine, right? Status quo is okay, but as you look out beyond that, right, and you think about the clients and the customers that have come to trust Denison and the brand and what that stands for and what that means, that experienced, innovative, personal touch, that boutique experience that we provide for our clients. We recognize that it was critical to invest now so that we're in a position to continue to deliver enhanced value as our clients face choice, right? We all have choice, and we want to be able to provide our clients, we want to meet them and meet their changing needs and anticipate those needs and be able to participate in that forward-looking discussion when we think about, well, what could be next, or how can you provide differentiated services and value to me, and that level of transformation, you want to lay the groundwork ahead of time so that you're in a position to support that.
I find that interesting because we talk to a lot of companies and they talk about a 3-year plan or not much beyond that, but you guys were looking beyond the 3-year plan. Where do we go from there? I think
Mhm.
that's a incredible use of foresight. So I wanted to ask a clarifying question.
Sure.
Being ignorant to the parking industry that I am, so I parked in one of your garages last night for an
Thank you very
event.
much.
Yeah, my pleasure. Am I your customer or is the building owner your customer?
Oh, that's a great question, and thank you for that, Jeff. You are a customer when you park in garages. We differentiate between our customers and our clients. And so our client would be the owner of that parking asset. So it could be a REIT, a real estate investment trust.
Ah,
It could
okay.
be a private owner. It could be a municipality, right? But when you park in one of the facilities that we operate, you are a customer, and we endeavor to provide an outstanding experience for our parkers, right? For the folks who are in our facilities, our customers, as well as for our clients, right? And that means understanding, right? We talked about design thinking, right? Understanding your users. Those can be two very different users, and so it's important to understand, right? What
Yes.
is the user who is a client? What is the user who is a monthly parker, right? Somebody who maybe works in an office building. And it's also important to understand the parker who is a daily parker, like it sounds like what you did, where
Right.
you just came down and parked in sort of a one-time transaction, right? And those all have different profiles, right?
Yeah.
And a
Yeah.
different
Yeah.
profile from if you were parking for an event, right? Like a football game or something.
Right. Because I would imagine that, yes, it was a good experience, right? I parked in the garage and I, paid my ticket to get out and all that. And it was a good experience. But I, as a customer, I'm not driving around looking for a Denison garage.
Right.
Right. I mean, that's not the way your business works. And we're probably getting down into a little bit of a rabbit hole here, but do you take that into consideration as you're building your business and building your technology, that the user experience may not drive repeat business for the daily parker, as you called me?
Right, right. We absolutely do. And for us, we do want to create that brand and that experience for the customer. So that way the customer knows when they see the Denison logo outside of a parking facility as they pull up, they know that they can count on a level of service, a
Yes.
cleanliness, a quality. And candidly, it helps us on the client side as well, right? We have
Yeah.
clients that reach out to us based on our reputation, right? Based on the fact that we've been in business since 1934, and we may have part of their portfolio, and they may have a property in a state where we don't even operate, and that property maybe is troubled, is experiencing some operating challenges, and they will reach out to us and say, because you have been successful here, here, and here, because of your reputation in the industry, we need you to come in and do XYZ, right? And
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
that reputation is so incredibly valuable in this industry.
So thank you for that lesson. I think it's important to understand the context of the business as we start to hear this transformational story. So, Matt, remind me, how long have you been with Denison now? Is it 3 years?
Just over 2 years.
Just over 2 years. So 2 years ago, you walk in the door as CIO of Denison. Describe it to us. What do you find? What do you think you're going to be doing? What do you find? And then how did you start this journey of transformation?
Oh, that's great. So it was super exciting. Not only was I coming in as the CIO, I was coming in as the first CIO,
Oh
and
yeah,
and that was also an experience. It was really I'll never forget. I was riding back in the first a month and a half or so when I was here. I went and visited one of our facilities out of state, and we went as a group. And I'll never forget on the return flight back, one of the other executives that I was sitting next to, she, tapped me on the leg, and she looks over and she says, you're nothing like what I expected a CIO to be, right?
that's a great compliment, isn't it?
Exactly. And
Huh?
I just looked over and smiled and said, thank you. I appreciate that, right? And in my mind, it's that engagement at the business level. Obviously, we all have to make sure that the printers are working, right? You don't get permission to do the
Yeah.
transformation, unless the day-to-day activity is in place. But step one is that sort of assessing the landscape. Where are we? What do things look like? And there had been some work done in that space prior to my arrival, which was what helped Denison recognize that they needed a CIO skill, right, and that enterprise transformation and operational focus, right, and so when I arrived, we looked across the landscape of our systems and our business processes, and we observed that our ERP in the beginning was a legacy system. Green screen, access to the financial data was limited to folks in the accounting and finance department. Uh, you can imagine, how asking a question that wasn't available in a standard report would require levels of engagement and analysis, right? There was no concept of self-service data
Mhm.
that you and I would resonate with,
Right.
and so we embarked on a journey, on a path to investigate what that would look like, right? Let's replace our core financial system. So much of what we do for our clients is essentially managing their asset, right? And a lot of that is financial management of the asset. And having core financial systems that are modern and dynamic and scalable is just an incredible advantage. And so we walked down that path and we engaged vendors and we engaged our internal stakeholders as well. And that's when we learned that not only do they feel a pain point around the financial systems, right? Again, keep in mind they didn't have access to real-time financial information, but they also
Mhm.
had pain points around our HRIS, the HR systems. And
Yeah.
so we said, well, let's reframe that. And we had already gone down the path of engaging ERP vendors. And we said, well, let's zoom out and see, is there an opportunity to also have a common platform for our HRIS and financial systems?
Because replacing your ERP is not a big enough project by itself,
Right.
right?
Exactly. Exactly. Yes, yes. And candidly, that is always a challenge, right? When you go down this path of how do you manage that scope and schedule? Because once you go down the path and you start setting expectations and painting a vision for the future, right? People become hungry for the promise, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And you get into it's the classic hype cycle, right? Expectations, they pile up and you have this sort of peak of inflated expectations, and as you
Mhm.
go through the implementation and you de-scope things or shift a schedule, you kind of go into the trough of despair, right? As you go
Right.
through that implementation, and organizational performance follows, right? Everybody wants to jump the maturity curve, to go from the current state to the future state as quickly as possible. But it's important to recognize that we're all humans.
Yeah, and you can't skip those stages, right? You've got to go through it.
You have got to go through those stages. That's exactly right. As leaders, as managers, it's incumbent on us to make that period of disruption as short and shallow as possible. But to think that it won't exist or to think that you can blast through it is to do a disservice to the people of the organization, right?
Yeah, yeah. So I know from our discussions, Matt, that a lot of your technology portfolio is either in the cloud now or moving to the cloud. Was that an intentional strategy that you set out in that direction, or was it a byproduct of something else as you were going through this?
Oh, yeah, that really great question, Jeff. So I always like to start with the users and the user experience in mind. And for us, what was critical was the ability to get access to data in a more real-time way to a wider group of folks, right? So that the manager of a particular facility can get access to their information, to the financial performance, to the HR information around their facility at any time. And as
Hmm.
you go down that path and explore the technologies available, right now you're talking, web technology, mobile app access. Many of the current industry-leading platforms to deliver that level of functionality are cloud-based.
Hmm.
And so we landed on cloud as a technology, as an implementation choice to deliver the experience that we were looking to deliver, right?
Yeah.
And of course, there are operational advantages and all of the things from an IT perspective, right? Obviously, you weigh those in, but we really led with sort of the user experience and wanted to make sure that we hit that first.
Gosh, imagine that, starting with the user in mind. I
Right.
love that. uh, so, where are things now? You started on this, what sounds like, I can just imagine our listeners cringing that you're doing your ERP, you're doing your HRIS, you're doing a CRM, kind of all at the same time.
Right.
So, where do things stand in that life cycle? What's your current state?
So we wanted to start small. We wanted to introduce change in a gradual way to get the organization accustomed to new things, and we started that by doing an O365 migration, and that was great. We launched Teams as a collaboration platform. So now, many of the folks again who are remote in the facilities across the U.S. They can now interact seamlessly, right? And instead of a phone call, it's an easy video conference. It's a quick instant message chat back and forth. That's been fantastic. And as part of that, that laid the groundwork for us to go to the next level of change, right? Which is launching ERP and CRM and HRIS, and those are all live
Right.
now and in production. And so now we're sort of in the optimization and incremental enhancements phase, right? Where we're taking a look at those core business processes and understanding how do we realize the efficiency and capability that the system brings that we didn't have before, right? How can we leverage that to increase speed, to reduce cost, to drive additional capability for our clients and our
Mhm.
customers? And we'll introduce some additional functionality and some additional integrations and of course integrations can be a double-edged sword
Right, right.
because on the one hand they can bring additional capability but also complexity and business risk,
And then
right?
somebody has to support them.
Exactly,
Yeah,
exactly.
yeah.
Yes.
So, Matt, when you decided to go Office 365, this may be a question that has already been answered, but again, I'm curious, why Office 365? Was it cloud, or did it go back to that strategy that you were talking about earlier about access from anywhere, anytime kind of thing? What was the driver in that choice?
That was driven, not necessarily cloud, although from an administration perspective and the ability to maintain and deliver the O365 platform is great. There's also a portfolio of capabilities, right? So rather than have a technology stack that is best in breed picked from multiple vendors, right? Where that's an absolutely valid choice for certain organizations, and we elected to go down the sort of single vendor uniform stack approach that provided the tool chain, the insight, the collaboration capability in a Microsoft platform. And we recognize that going down that path would allow us to do things like integrate uh, the authentication engine for our Office 365 and email and use that same authentication strategy for our ERP, HRIS, CRM systems.
Yeah,
And so again, in the case of integrations can be good and bad, right? When that integration goes down, obviously, you've got sensitivities across the portfolio of your offerings, but at the same time, the user experience is consistent.
yeah,
The
yeah.
ability to manage passwords, right? And all of those things, it drives your help desk calls down. So we were intentional on that particular technology choice because of the advantages in operations.
Yeah. Yeah. That makes a lot of sense. So I want you to sit in front of your crystal ball right now. You've kind of optimized your core. You're still doing some work related to operational efficiencies, but you've stabilized your core and you've optimized it.
Mhm.
In your opening, you were You mentioned some things that are a bit provocative, right? Electric cars and mobile apps and all these kinds of things. So, what's next? What does the world of parking look like in, call it 2025?
Well, that crystal ball is super fun, and we all think, 5 years from now we'll have autonomous vehicles and we won't have to do all these. And in reality, we will have progress toward all of
Yeah.
these things, right? But I fully expect that in 2025 I'll still be sitting behind a steering wheel. I do think electrification is really taking off. The notion of opening up your inventory, the inventory of parking to a
Hmm.
wider audience, right? That benefits not only the parker, right, who is searching for parking maybe on their mobile device,
Exactly.
but it also benefits the asset owner, right? Because now they're able to capture more demand. So connecting
Mhm.
the provider with the purchaser, right? That's that
Yes.
notion of platforms is very powerful, and being able to provide insight to the asset owners and to the customers, right? That turning data, the parking industry, believe it or not, is awash in data,
Hmm.
and turning that data into insight, and then the insight into action, right? That path, that pipeline, will be really transformational, and that I believe will happen in the next 5 years.
That would be great. As I mentioned as we were talking through this, I don't go downtown and drive around to find a Denison garage. But if I had an app on my phone similar to Open Table,
Right.
right, that I could reserve a spot in one of your garages next to Bankers Life Fieldhouse because I'm going to a Pacer game tonight, that would be really cool. That now I know where I'm going to park and I don't have to stress over it.
Exactly. And now imagine that when you bought your Pacers tickets, you had the ability to buy parking at the same time, right?
Yeah,
That
yeah.
that level of integration is becoming available, and I think you'll see that over the next few. There are industry players pushing toward that vision of the future now.
That sounds really exciting. And Matt, I know we're running up on time here, so I do want to go to kind of my closing question. As we've talked about, you've covered a lot of ground today in starting into an industry and into a company that was awash in legacy applications and knew that it had to change, and you've put together a plan to start down that path. And I think as you related to us, it really started with your assessment, but your focus always on the user, whether it's one of your client users, one of the garage owners, the real estate companies, or whether it's one of your customers, the people that park, you always focused on those. So long lead into the question of, we've got a wide variety of listeners out there today in a wide variety of industries. What should they do tomorrow because they heard your story today?
I would say start small, lay the foundation for change, right? We all recognize that change is hard. It doesn't come easy. Sometimes you can't even get access to all of the data, and what you think is common data may not be common. Once you understand the data, that can also be telling. It can drive changes in budgets, in projects, in org structures, right? It can be very disquieting, but
Mhm.
keep that focus on the user. And if you understand who your core users are and the experience that you're looking to deliver, and by the way, I want to make sure that I highlight one of the key users are your internal users, right? The employees that
Yeah,
you're
yeah.
serving, the people in the organization, right? Denison pivots on our people. We have amazing people, and delivering that experience for them is just as critical as the customers and the clients, right? And if you get those right, then everything else will fall into place.
That is a great addition. I left that user group out, and that is, thank you for pointing that out, Matt, because I think that's a great way to focus and a great way to wrap on our conversation today. I want to thank you for taking the time out of your day. I know as a CIO, your day, your calendar is pretty full, and I appreciate you sitting down with us and talking. would love to invite you back on a future show, maybe dig deeper into some of these concepts as you continue down this path. But do want to thank you so much today for taking the time.
It's been my pleasure, Jeff. Thank you so much.
To our listeners, if you have a question or want to learn more, you can visit intervision.com. The show notes will provide links and contact information. This is Jeff Tunn for Matt Belanger. Thank you very much for listening.
You've been listening to the Status Go podcast. You can subscribe on iTunes or get more information at intervision.com. If you'd like to contribute to the conversation, find Intervision on Facebook, LinkedIn, or Twitter. Thank you for listening. Until next time.